What is the purpose of technology? I strongly believe it is only meaningful, it enhances humanness. And our core humanness comes from our freedom and our free will. And if it was infringed by the technology, in whatever reason, I think we have to stop and think how we actually restructure our futures and technology.
Hello, I'm Noelle Lim on ASEAN Speaks by Maybank Investment Banking Group. In celebration of International Women's Day, Break the Bias, I speak to Dr. Yuhyun Park, founder of DQ Institute. She led the movement to create the world's first global standard for digital intelligence, or DQ, which covers digital literacy, skills, and readiness. The standard is endorsed by the IEEE Standards Association, OECD, and the World Economic Forum. When she first embarked on this journey, it was met with skepticism in South Korea, where she is from. But she did not give up. A chance meeting led her to meet like-minded people in Singapore, and her ideas took root. This is her story about her work and how she got from graduating with a PhD from Harvard to starting DQ Institute.
Yes, I completed my PhD in biostatistics in Harvard. And I also work as a postdoc in public health and Harvard Medical School. My research back then was on developing the algorithm for DNA chips. After that, I moved out of academia and I joined Boston Consulting Group, where I experienced digital media and technology company. How I get into the DQ and social impact movement started in 2010, my own NGO called Infolution Zero in Korea. Infolutions means information pollution. So it was a new word that was created in one of the telco industry, the forum. So I started this NGO for the online protections for children in Korea. It was my starting journey for social impact. I started this journey pretty much as an individual who are concerned and angry mother, I have to say, to protect our children from cyber risk, such as gaming disorder. People called it gaming addiction, risky content and contact, and cyberbullying. There were low awareness on this the cyber risk, especially on children. But at the time also, there were a lot of stories, episodic stories of children committed suicide due to cyberbullying, or there were many cases related to the gaming addictions. But when they heard this story, they just thought of these cases as a few episodic stories of bad kids, so-called. So they didn't really consider it much as a societal issue. But what I actually observed at the time was that these cyber risk issue are not episodic or individual issue. It was more on the systematic and industrial issue. So that was how I started this NGO.
You started this in Seoul, Korea first. What was the initial reception to your idea of this NGO, information pollution?
Parents, teenagers, and young children, they're more concerned about how they can put their children in the top university rather than thinking about the digital skills or the cyber issue much at the time. And from the government perspective and industry perspective, it was a big way at the time to push the digital transformation agenda in Korea. Talking about the cyber risk, they think of it as not really supporting the national agenda. So it was not very welcome, to be honest. Yes.
Then you got an invitation to the Blue House, which is like the home and office of the president. And you met a civil servant there, an official there, and he inquired about what you were doing. And if you could tell us a bit about what happened during that meeting.
Well, it was not really official invitation from the Blue House. It was one of their officials who was intrigued by my interview in the newspaper, who wanted to understand what I tried to achieve. My story was actually covered by major newspapers, and which was not because of this cause. They tried to interview me because of my elite background. Not anymore in Korea in 2022, but back then, like people who work in civic society usually have some political agenda. So either vindicative or personal or or political agenda. But at the time when I started it, I didn't have any. And then on top of my elite background, people got curious about what I tried to say. This meeting at the Blue House official was, I think, one of those meetings. He didn't really was not very curious about my inclusion zero agenda, more about the me personal agenda, what is actually hidden agenda behind it. At the time, I was very frustrated because I was not considered very seriously whenever I presented this inclusion zero issue. At the conversation, this official asked me, what are you trying to achieve? It just came out of my mouth. I didn't really think about it. I just said that I will make global standards for digital empowerment for children, which every nation have to take heed of, and every industry wants to consider. So it was just dropped out of my mouth, and I was the one who was surprised most because I didn't really plan to say it. It was 2010 fall when I had this conversation. September 2020, exactly 10 years later, the DQ became the global standard for digital literacy, digital skills, and digital readiness, and digital citizenship, which is a fundamental skills for online safety and empowerment, became the standard. I am ultimately grateful for the opportunity that I could contribute. So it was quite memorable moment in 10 years ago, in 2010, that conversations. Thanks to him, somehow I started this movement in the way.
Then you moved to Singapore. What happened there? And you took up a position in NTU, Nanyang Technological University, and that some opportunities came about for you to develop your idea further.
After that conversation at Blue House in Korea, I worked with the Korean government, not through him, yeah. So I worked with Korean government to set the children program. So after that conversation, I gave up the hope to work with adults. So I wanted to work with the kids, and especially for my own children. So I have two kids. So I look at how they play, and I try to find a way that I can engage children to learn about the digital citizenship issue starting from very young. So I developed a program called IZ Hero Projects. So IZ stands for the Inclusion Zero. And so my wish was that children becomes a hero to actually change the digital landscape completely, not from the adults, but from the children. So I developed this program, and we put the first group exhibitions in Korean Science Center. And then I moved to NTU. And while I worked with NTU, it was real multi-stakeholder way. So we work with the IEMDA, Media Literacy Councils in Singapore government, as well as the Singtel, who was a major sponsor for our initiative. So we developed the IZ Hero projects into the nationwide digital citizen initiative. And we built the Singapore Science Center, the 10 times larger exhibition back then. So it was about the first 5 years of journey when I first joined NTU. And I worked with the National Institute of Education's Professor Angie Khoo's group, who have been doing the wonderful, wonderful research on cyber wellness. So we upgraded into the small exhibition in Korea, into the research-based projects on nationwide initiative on digital citizenship movement.
Did you join NTU with the understanding that you would be developing your idea further?
Honestly, I was a buy one, get one. My husband joined NTU as he was selected as a National Research Fellow. At the time, the NTU and NUS tried to get him. And then Namjoon, my husband, said there's a very stubborn woman in my house, who doesn't want to move to Singapore. So that was me. The NTU president at the time, Bertil Anderson, say, okay, I want to meet with her. So while we had a conversation, I had a conversation with Bertil. I got very intrigued by the NTU, and they also intrigued by my background. So that's how I started. So nothing was actually planned. Everyone pointed to NG Koo, the professor at NIE, and who was a master of cyber wellness research in Singapore. So she and I clicked immediately, and then the magic started. I cannot credit to myself because there were many great people who worked together and who enable every milestone. Honestly, I don't know who nominated me and how I get into the YGL. So one day I got a call from my friends that, hey, congratulations, you are now young global leader. And I asked the person, what is young global leader? I was not young, I was not global leaders. I became YGL in 2015. So I was 39. The beauty of me working with the World Economic Forum was not only about the YGL community, but also the colleagues in the World Economic Forums. So at that time, World Economic Forum also started the agenda of fourth industrial revolutions. And my agenda of child online safety and beyond was quite fitting to one another. So through the World Economic Forum to introduce the new concept of digital intelligence. And then I met amazing, great people over there. So I want to explain this concept of DQ and how it was started. After working with the Singapore government, academia, and also industry, I found the very pressing needs of developing new intelligence in the fourth industrial revolution or beyond. I called it AI age because what I found is that cyber risk issue is only a surface issue. It is a just symptomatic issue of the speed gap that we are experiencing as whole world. So speed gap, which means is that technology moves so fast. As you can see, the technologies say future is already here. That means that technology is already ready. The problem is that while technology moves exponential, our human response cannot follow the speed. Human response means our culture, our regulation policy, and our educations. The self-infrastructure are not following in that speed. There's huge gap and is ever increasing right now. So because of that, the cyber risk, what I realize is that it is unintended, intended side effect of this speed gap that has generated. So there are two ways to address this speed gap. One is bring down the technology speed, right? Or we are going to enhance our human response. The biggest element of human response is, of course, educations. But bringing down technology seems like not really possible in a way. If you see how COVID actually pushed the whole world, the even faster digitization and technology push. But in order for us to actually move up our human response, one thing that I found that is most important thing is think about what is a new concept of intelligence that is needed to address this speed gap as well as to enable individuals to thrive in the digital age. So that's why I developed the digital intelligence. So digital intelligence, I called it DQ. I want it to be very simple. First and second industrial revolution, there were IQ born. The smart people are needed in the society. After third industrial revolution, EQ was born. Society needed not just about smart people who can relate with others. Now we have AI who is taking over a lot of capability that human has, labors, mental, and a lot of others. So now we need a digital skills and digital intelligence to enable humans to work together with the machines. And on top of that, how we can keep our humanness as much as possible. So DQ was born in the concept as a new intelligence. And then when I published this DQ concept in the World Economic Forum in 2016, I developed in 2015 and 16, I made a publications And then I got a call at the 2017 from the IEEE, which is the biggest technology associations who develop the technology standard. They call me and say, "Hey, Yuhyun, we want to develop the industry standard for digital skills." And so they looked at more than 100 literatures, and they liked the DQ most because it was most comprehensive. So I say, "Wow, that's great. Why don't we do that?" And then I found that industry standard was not enough because we want to ensure that this is an issue across the industry, technology, and educations. So I called the OECD, where I worked as a education expert, see whether they're interested in to join the force. So we launched the Coalition for Digital Intelligence together with OECD representing educations, IEEE representing industry and technology, and World Economic Forum as a convener, and DQ Institute as the topic expert. So what we agreed is to use the DQ as a common language for digital skills and digital literacy, and coordinating the efforts around the world. So that's 2018. And it took us about 2 years to finalize it.
Now, about 80 countries, 80, have adopted DQ standards. How do they adopt these standards? How do they show up? I guess, how do these in a country, say like in Singapore?
Actually, 80 country is not necessarily like DQ standard per se. That it is also another separate story. So in 2017, separately from the standardization effort, I run the DQ Every Child, which is the digital citizenship movement, not whole DQ and digital skills area. I focus on the digital citizenship issue among the primary school kids. So I started the movement together with the World Economic Forum in Singapore. Singtel is our major partners. And we push this agenda very, very hard because as our name signifies, our belief is that digital citizenship is must have digital skills for every child. So we developed a children platform that any child can actually come and learn. So we developed in a way back when I was NTU together with the Singapore government and Singtel. So we developed the program called the DQ World, and teach children about this issue in a more systematic way. So this is online e-learning platform that was used by the children actually more than 100 countries. And the 80 countries was children who have significant number of children participated. So that's the number came from. And DQ standard has been adopted in a very different fashions. So DQ standard has been adopted as many by many countries as well as industry as a reference frameworks.
So for companies like Maybank, how do you embed DQ skills and standards, where it's obviously organizations like ours, it's absolutely critical for us to have strong IT protection. Because what I understand about these DQ skills is not just about what you can do and what you cannot do. It's actually goes beyond that. Tell us a bit more about that.
Digital intelligence actually is all competency that is needed to thrive in the digital age. That is a definition. Of course, we have a lengthy academic definition, but this is the gist of it. So if you come to the DQ standard, you will find all these possible the digital skills, including advanced digital skills like AI literacy, coding, digital marketing, and more. But so it's covering the old digital skills. And what's the beauty of it is that we actually created the standard and codify it. So any industry partners can work with us and then develop their own digital skills based on their digital agenda. So you can think of it digital intelligence as like a book of Wikipedia or a book of dictionary that you can find that all the possible digital skills around the world. But if you ask me about how it can be starting very easily, is two ways. One is other industry also started working with us in these fashions about they developed their own digital skills frameworks for their own employee skilling, as well as that, the skilling for their own customers as a CSR or ESG perspective. Second way is about which I think is quite important. If you ask any CEO in not just financial sectors in these days, I think one of the key agenda is a digital transformation. Is key success factors to survive in today's business. And when you think about digital transformation, what does it mean? Changing technology and system to another level of digital tech is rather easy. Biggest challenge of all CEOs will be how to change the mindset of their employees and their customers to operate in the digital economy, not in the old fashion, not in the new fashions. So if you think about it, it's like a changing DNA, transforming the physical DNA to digital DNA to live in this digital world and digital economy. If you have a chance to get to my book, I actually named the one chapter as a digital DNA, because I describe the first level of digital intelligence, which is the digital citizenship, as a digital DNA. What does it mean is that in order for you to have the digital skills, first you know how to live online. So you need to be a digital citizen first, to have the mindset of digital citizen. So your employees and customers now meet maybe in an orchard, Maybank Tower or Kuala Lumpur. That was before that they operate in a physical realm. Now they're meeting virtually. They need to be transformed from the Singaporean citizens or Malaysian citizens to become a digital citizens. So that's actually the must-have skill set. Not just about every every actually individuals to have. The reason I share it is that a lot of the scaling effort have been very focused on the operational way. But if you think about the digital skills and changing the mindset, which is most important thing, is that is a skill that you want to tackle first.
So what's interesting now, technology companies have been coming under scrutiny by regulators or governments in terms of their practices and role in many areas, actually, one of them being fake news, in curbing fake news. Well, what's the best way to work with tech companies for the greater good?
Yep, it is a very important question. And it's also a very difficult question. I also work with TikTok as a chairperson of TikTok Safety Council in Asia Pacific. A lot of times, when we think about the tech company, you're thinking social media like Facebook, TikTok, or, Big Five, Google, Amazon's, Microsoft, and others. Now, this tech company have greater power. As Spider-Man said, greater power means greater responsibility. So regulations and more scrutiny is needed and should not be avoided. So fake news and, fake news is a big issue in every social media and every actually communication realm. And helping customers to have a better digital citizenship and literacy is something that has been just become the norm of those social medias and the big tech company. But I think it has to be thought of it as more about not CSR and branding exercises. We need to consider the safety by design, privacy by design, and ethics by design. Having this online protections for users, especially from the children's, has to be embedded from the central business policy and practices, and which are demanded by users as well as regulators and more for this big tech. But I think it has to be also becomes a norm to any company who wants to operate in a digital realm.
What's your vision of the world that your children will grow up in, and what does DQ do that will help achieve this?
It's freedom. If you ask me the one word, freedom, free will. Even though it seems like very, very intuitive to all of us, actually it is not. If you consider after COVID-19, if you're looking at what are the traces that has been collected by the all different authorities and all different companies, we are so now accustomed to digital tracking and share our very own personal sensitive data with authorities. And if you're thinking about AI, big data, biotech, and other technology companies who is opening up the free flow of the data, some experts predict that the individual's free will becomes like meaningless in near future because big techs and government will know which is what is better for you more than yourself. If you look at the like YouTube algorithm, do you choose it or you're being chosen to watch something? So it started with the very small, but actually there is a huge implications. How can we live as individuals with the free will, freedoms in the future in this tech-oriented world is a big, big question that all of us have to ask ourselves. And I want to remind ourselves is what is the purpose of technology? I strongly believe it is only meaningful, it enhances humanness. And our core humanness comes from our freedom and our free will. And if it was infringed by the technology, in whatever reason, I think we have to stop and think how we actually restructure our futures and technology. What I try to achieve through the DQ is to support the individuals to think independently and have understanding on the technology in a deeper way so that we are not just individuals don't receive the information as being a user rather than they becomes the creators and innovators who can use and control and create the technology for their own benefit and others' benefit and enhance our humanness. So that's what DQ wants to achieve in a long term. And when it comes to your question about my child, I strongly believe that every child is so important. Any child today is in, for instance, like Afghanistan, any girl, she must have a same opportunity with my son, and who is quite safe in Singapore. Through the technology, that's the technology that world that we want to create. And I wrote it in my book as well. Why we want to be inclusive? Because we are so interconnected. Unless it is not for every child, my own child won't be benefited either. So I think it is very important for us to have a mindset about others, not just about ourselves. And then DQ, I want the DQ to be the vehicles to achieve that world.
So, what's the plan for the next 5 years?
Next 5 years, we want to ensure that we create the DQ index to be the standard and tracker to true measure, true assessment tools for the digital transformation. And we started this as a collaborative project across the sector with the international organizations, companies, and governments, and more. So, for instance, we started the digital well-being indicator frameworks together with National University of Singapore. They're working with a Singtel on a telco side of the digital transformation measures and others. So I would love to see if there is an interest in Maybank to be part of this, create the trackers and impact measure for digital skills for the financial sector. That would be fantastic.
This year's International Women's Day is about Break the Bias. How does DQ help to do this?
So I'm leading the ITU Equals initiative, which is a female digital skills empowerment. And one of the key things that we've found globally, there's still parity between the men's and women's in terms of how much the digital skills that we have and how much technology adoption has been unevenly distributed. So it is a huge task that we have to work together to empower women with the digital skills. And DQ, our experience, DQ has been very well accepted by the female empowerment in a way that, we are encompassing not just hard skills and codings and, computational thinking, which is also important, but also soft skills about communications, empathy, and a lot of where the females can have a better, seemingly competitive advantage have. So I think, it is important for us to think of digital skills in a much more holistic way rather than just who can become engineers. And another thing is about having the perception, the bias that women are weak with the technology and not good with the math and science and STEM level, which is not true, actually. So it is important to break perceptions, the biased perception, and encourage the women and girls, especially girls, that we need to tell them that you can be anything you want to be. They don't need to be technologists, but they can be technologists if they want. And we need to provide the access and to the learning opportunity to them very equally, which is amazingly, amazingly important. And I wish that, everybody who is listening this podcast, who is in the leadership, should support the female empowerment in technology.
Thank you so much for speaking to us, and happy International Women's Day. Dr. Yuhyun Park, founder of DQ Institute. I'm Noelle Lim on ASEAN Speaks by Maybank Investment Banking Group.